Hey, why are you acting like it's normal to show up? Auntie, I told you to skip my wedding. My niece sneered as she asked me not to attend her wedding. Ever since my brother passed away 11 years ago, I had raised her like she was my own daughter. But there was a reason she suddenly started hurting such harsh words at me. My name is Effie and my brother, Jason, was 12 years older than me. Jason was a kind soul. When we were young, he'd hold my hand as we ran errands, help me practice riding my bicycle, and shower me with love. The year I entered middle school was also the year my beloved brother got married and moved out. I remember Jason and his wife's wedding being full of joy. I clapped so hard my palms ached. The following year, a baby girl was born to Jason and his wife, Mary. Being the youngest in the family, I was thrilled to have a little sister-like figure in my life. We named her Heidi, and I loved her as much as my brother had loved me. Even after Heidi was born, my brother and his wife continued to dote on me, and from middle school to high school, I frequently visited their home and spent time as a part of their family. While sitting at lunch one day, I thought to myself that I hadn't seen Heidi in a while. I was now 27 years old and working for a major fruit wholesale company, directly dealing with fruit farmers from various regions. I was not initially familiar with agriculture, but I learned a bit each day by listening to the voices of the producers, and I was now a leading staff among the employees, trusted with guiding my colleagues. One stormy day, I received sudden news that shocked me. That day, a typhoon was approaching, and we finished work a bit earlier than usual. Still, the weather outside was incredibly violent during my commute home, with gusts of wind so powerful they threatened to carry me away. It was on such a stormy day that my brother, under the orders of his boss, had been forced to go out on sales rounds. Jason was very earnest and hardworking, even on that day. He was trying to make sales even in the adverse weather and didn't slack off. As he walked through the strong wind, a sign from a building fell and struck him directly. I heard about my brother's death, and I somehow managed to get my trembling legs to take me to the hospital. By the time I arrived, everyone was already there, and my parents were hunched over, silently. Seeing my parents crying and the painful sight of my brother, I couldn't help but shed tears, even though I still couldn't believe what had happened. Even though I understood the situation, the reality was too hard to accept. I sat next to my brother and cried. I noticed Mary and Heidi, Jason's wife and daughter, looking as if they were in a daze, not sobbing but simply staring blankly at the wall. Thinking it best to leave them be, I felt so sorry for them. From then on, we supported each other as a family even more than before. Mary, who is currently on leave from work, was a part-time worker within the scope of dependent support, and she will need a job in the future to sustain her life. My parents and I decided to support Heidi and Mary's future, including her re-employment, with all our might. About a year after the funeral, Mary, who had returned to part-time work, decided to move because the rent was becoming too much for her current income. She had received compensation and workers' compensation insurance from Jason's company due to the accident at work, and of course, we agreed with Mary's prudent decision. But on the day of the move, when we went to help, we found only Heidi crying in the somewhat tidied room. Heidi, holding a letter that said her mother couldn't raise her on her own, was only 16 years old. It seemed that Mary had called us to help with the move to ensure her daughter was taken care of after she left. Reading the letter, I felt a tightness in my chest, wondering if Mary had been so anxious that she wanted to run away after Jason's death. From the contents of the letter and what Heidi told me, it seemed that Mary believed it would be better for Heidi to be raised by our family than by her, who was economically unstable. Although it said she was thinking of Heidi first, what she did was equivalent to abandoning her high school daughter. Of course, I was angry at Mary, and we even went to search for her at her parents' house. However, the people who came out of the house were a family we didn't know, and we learned that not only Mary but also her parents had moved. We contacted Mary's relatives, but there was no family willing to live with Heidi, who was a high school student and had the prospect of significant expenses for college. As a result of our discussions, we decided to take care of Heidi in my house with the support of my parents. Despite the difficult times, Heidi smiled and said, "Effie, please take good care of me." And I hugged her tightly. 11 years have passed since then, and Heidi graduated from college and found a job at a local company. When she brought up a serious conversation, I felt the passage of time and nodded. "You're 27 now, after all." Seeing that, Heidi blushed a little and said, "Effie, I'm getting married." She met her boyfriend through a friend, and he was 1 year older than Heidi, and he seemed like a gentle and fine young man from the pictures. According to Heidi, he really cares about her, and although he is usually reliable, he can be a bit off at times, and she likes that part of him too. I was really happy and repeated, "Congratulations!" so many times that Heidi was amazed. The man seems to be quite busy, and I haven't met him face to face yet. Heidi would try to set up dates for me to see him, but it always falled on days that I was busy. But, in spite of her boyfriend's busy schedule, he actively participated in the wedding preparations, and Heidi seemed truly happy. When they shared with me that their ideal plan was beyond their budget, I remembered my brother's wonderful wedding. I wanted Heidi to have the most memorable wedding, one that would make her happy for the rest of her life. I provided financial support as much as possible and looked forward to a ceremony filled with Heidi's dreams. On the long-awaited wedding day, as it was time to leave, I urged Heidi to prepare and made my final check on my belongings. I couldn't afford to make a mistake at my daughter's grand event, so I checked multiple times before finally setting off. As I followed Heidi down the hallway, I was already filled with so many emotions. Just the sight of her in her wedding dress was enough to make me tear up. I thought that both the groom and his parents, as well as my late brother in heaven, might laugh at me if they saw me crying so much. Still, I found these moments of contemplation to be a joy. Just as we got to the front door, Heidi turned around abruptly. She smiled gently at me and said, "Don't come, Auntie." "Huh? I'm telling you to not attend my wedding, Aunt Effie." I stared at Heidi, unable to comprehend what she had just told me. She burst out laughing at my confusion. "Why do you think you have the right to attend my wedding? No matter how much you did for me to replace my mother, you're still my aunt, an outsider, right? There's no way I can introduce you as my mother to my guests." The words spoken by my niece, whom I had lived with and cherished for over 10 years, were shockingly hurtful. Indeed, I'm not her biological mother. No matter how much time has passed, Heidi never called me her mom. The reality that to Heidi, her only mother was Mary, finally hit me again. I was left speechless by Heidi's words, which she uttered with a smile. There was a moment when I thought, despite having raised her this far, but I realized it was a one-sided and arrogant sentiment. It is indeed regrettable that I cannot witness my daughter's grand event, but if this is for Heidi's happiness, I will do as she says. Suppressing my feelings, I told her that I understood, and gave her my blessings and decided to absent myself from the wedding. Several hours later, Heidi returned home while I was still recovering from the shock. She came into the living room laughing cheerfully, and to my surprise, behind her was Mary, who had disappeared 11 years ago. "Long time no see. Effie, you've aged a lot." Mary, who made quite a light-hearted entrance, extended her hand towards me the moment she saw my speechless face. "I'm sure you know that my daughter got married. Give us a gift, $10,000 will do. You'll be down to offer Heidi that amount, right, Auntie Effie?" Her red lipstick-clad mouth curled into a smirk. Heidi, standing next to Mary, echoed her mother's words with a similar smile. As they urged me to cough up the money quickly, the two started revealing a shocking truth. In fact, Mary's disappearance was a scheme to freely spend the insurance money and the funds from my brother's company. Mary, who had been working part-time and left the household finances to my brother, seemed to have completely changed after suddenly coming into a lot of money. Although she had never been poor, she became stingy about spending the money she had acquired, even on her daughter, once she realized that she could control everything. Her greed led her to use me, a single woman with a stable life, to raise Heidi, so she could save on major expenses like college tuition. And terrifyingly, this all was a farce that Heidi was aware of. Only our family thought Mary had disappeared. She and Heidi were secretly contacting each other on their phones to prevent us from finding out, and they eventually started meeting once a month. When Heidi became a college student, her spending increased dramatically, and I heard she had started a part-time job, but in reality, she was receiving pocket money from Mary and hanging out. For Heidi, who was in her partying phase, Mary, who gave her money and let her do as she pleased every month, was undeniably the best mother. That's why, Heidi coldly laughed, she deliberately refused to call me mom, knowing how much I loved her as my daughter. After Mary finished revealing the truth about her disappearance, she laughed mockingly and said, "Oh? Did you perhaps use up all your savings and can't afford a gift anymore? But well, it was a more lavish ceremony than expected, so I'm proud as a mother who supported her financially for her wedding. Right, Auntie?" Hee hee, Mom, you're so mean. From now on, you should save for yourself. I absolutely won't take care of you after your retirement. It was fun being your pretend daughter, but bye-bye now. The two of them laughed heartily, stating that they would take the wedding expenses as a combination of a wedding gift and severance payment. They declared to cut off ties with me and left the house, claiming to attend their after-party and dinner with friends. Left behind, I was too overwhelmed by shock to comprehend the events of the past 11 years. About 30 minutes later, my parents arrived. They had been shocked at the wedding when Mary appeared as Heidi's mother, but didn't want to ruin their granddaughter's big day, so they stayed put until the ceremony ended. Afterwards, they had been looking for Mary. Unable to find her and unable to reach me, they decided to check on me at home. Seeing my parents, I broke down in tears. When I tearfully confessed everything about Heidi and Mary's scheme, my parents were furious. However, even if my parents wanted to talk directly, it seemed that Heidi had already switched off her phone, and we couldn't reach her. We could have tried to locate Heidi through Jason's family. But we had raised Heidi because we wanted to. Confronting them wouldn't make us feel better, because we never expected anything in return. We could have hired a lawyer to claim back my money, but I just didn't have the courage to sue my own daughter, whom I had cherished and raised for over 10 years. After discussing the situation, we decided to let it go, as they wished. We decided to sever our ties and bury everything in the past. Once free from the situation, I took the bold step of resigning from the company I had been working for and started my own fruit wine manufacturing business. I used domestically produced fruit that couldn't be sold due to irregular shapes, or fruits that were partially damaged due to weather conditions, to develop and produce my products. My new venture, which I started with the idea of reducing fruit waste while still working at my previous company, gradually gained support from not only farmers but also various supporters due to the growing concern about food waste. Though it was challenging as I embarked on this new journey, connections I made during my corporate career helped me immensely, and I made steady progress. The business that initially ran at a loss slowly started to increase its sales over 3 to 5 years, and consistent growth made it a company to watch in the industry. One day, Heidi suddenly visited my office. She was already crying when she arrived and ran towards me as soon as she spotted me. Surprised, but not wanting to cause a scene, I took her into the reception room.
Effie, I'm really sorry for everything. I've reflected on my actions, and I need your help. I'm still like a daughter to you, right? After all, we lived together for such a long time. I'm really in trouble. Effie, please help me financially.
A woman, now well over 30, sobbed like a toddler. A receptionist, who Heidi seemed to have pushed past, arrived out of breath with several other staff members, all trying to drag Heidi out of the office. Watching this scene, I felt disheartened. She was, after all, after my money. According to Heidi, by the time Mary had appeared before me, she had almost exhausted all the money she had. Unaware of this, newlyweds Heidi and Jason expected support from Mary and willingly invited her to live with them. Initially, their life together seemed to go well, but everything changed when they built a new house. Heidi's husband took out a hefty loan to build a house with unique architectural features, expecting his mother-in-law to pay for it. Heidi wanted a kitchen with the latest equipment, and Mary, assuming her sister-in-law was well off, chose the best from wallpapers to lighting for her room. Their loan turned out to be a heavy burden as everyone was relying on someone else's money. To make matters worse, their lifestyle was beyond their means, and Mary's money was already depleted. Even so, Mary, claiming to have given Heidi enough pocket money, started asking for money and never worked. This drove Jason to gambling out of stress from his mother-in-law's outrageous behavior. Unbeknownst to Heidi and Mary, Heidi's husband even accrued debt under their names, leaving their household finances in shambles, regardless of how much Heidi worked.
We're now trying to sell the house as his parents suggested, but we can't find any buyers. Mom gets fired every time she tries to work, and both my husband and I are exhausted from working overtime every day. You're the only one I can rely on, Effie. If I'm not happy, Dad wouldn't be able to rest in peace either, right?
Heidi, desperately appealing to me, reached her hand out while being escorted by my staff, smearing her face with tears and snot as she asked for money. I was slightly relieved to find that my heart was unmoved by this spectacle. The matter of this mother and daughter had firmly become a thing of the past in my mind. Finally, I broke my silence.
Do you have an appointment, ma'am? Our company is not a financial institution, so we cannot lend money to strangers. If you're in trouble, please consult a bank or consumer finance company.
Stunned, Heidi was lost for words when I turned back her own phrase, stranger, that one had pushed me to the abyss of despair. Maybe she thought that if she cried and pleaded, she would get help. I followed my staff and led Heidi to the company's entrance. When she still wouldn't budge, I gently pushed her shoulder, guiding her a step outside the entrance. Realizing that I was never going to be her ally, for the first time, Heidi called me Mom.
I don't have a daughter, I said.
My words must have struck her hard as she turned white and ran away. After that incident, I started receiving spam texts from Heidi and Mary, which all centered around the dire financial situation. I ignored them all, but they persistently requested money or a loan. Seeing this, it's clear that they're struggling under a crushing debt. It would be a nuisance if they call my company's front desk, even if I block their calls. So, I'm receiving bunch of texts, but I have no intention of ever replying. If they ever send something to my company, I might sue them for business obstruction. Finally recovering, I've decided to move abroad to expand my business and study to make better wines. It seems I won't have to face those two for a while, and with anticipation for my new environment, I'm dedicating myself to work every day.
Ah! Look, it's the bitch!
My 6-year-old daughter pointed at the woman who had come to our house. Today was the day my son brought his fiancée over. I quickly lowered my daughter's pointing hand and bowed repeatedly to the fiancé, embarrassed by the terrible thing my daughter had said to her. Upon hearing this, my daughter looked up at me with pure curiosity and said, "But, sis was happy being called a bitch." My name is Trinity. At 31, I'm living my life juggling work and parenting. You could say I'm a working mom. My husband, Michael, is also 31. A kind and justice-driven man, Michael is a well-respected salesman within his company. He's supportive in both childcare and household chores, always taking the initiative without me having to ask. It's truly a blessing, especially when I come home tired from work. Marrying Michael was the best decision of my life. Every day, I'm grateful for my husband, Michael. Our daughter, Yasmin, is 6 years old. Full of growth and energy, Yasmin's curiosity knows no bounds. Every day she discovers something new and excitedly shouts, "Mom, look!" enjoying her own little world. It's a relief when she can play by herself, especially when I'm tied up with household chores. Reaching my 30s, I've noticed a waning interest in the wider world, making Yasmin's daily joy frankly enviable. With my husband often away on business trips, he's mostly home only on weekends and holidays. Since I often work weekends too, the days when the whole family is together are rare. However, we're a close-knit family, making the most of our time together, whether we're going on trips or playing locally. Our family relationship is very healthy. Occasionally, my mom, who lives nearby, comes over to visit. Yasmin adores my mom, always exclaiming, "Grandma! Grandma!" in excitement. It's heartwarming to see my mom happily respond with a "yes" to Yasmin's calls. For me, busy with work, my mom's presence is invaluable. Compared to mom, I've always had a strained relationship with my dad. There's no clear reason, but our personalities just don't mesh. We have different perspectives, and it seems we disagree on everything. You encounter such people at work too, but the best strategy is usually to keep your distance. It seems Dad feels the same way, hardly ever showing up at my house. Even when I introduced Michael, Dad opposed our marriage. His reason being, "Something about him just doesn't sit right. Something about him just doesn't sit right." Such a selfish reason. To oppose the person your daughter has seriously chosen to be with, just because you don't like something about them, is just too selfish. My already poor relationship with Dad only worsened after he opposed our marriage. But I went ahead and married Michael, ignoring my dad's opposition, because it's my life. Maybe out of a sense of guilt, I found myself avoiding Dad after the wedding. I get along well with Michael's parents, my in-laws, who live far away. When we can take long vacations in summer and winter, I take Michael and Yasmin to visit them. Yasmin has been familiar with them since she was little, so she's not shy at all and is very dear to them. I've always been close to my brother Trevor, who is 5 years older. Our attachment to each other might seem a bit unusual to some. We even exchange emails daily. I share updates about Yasmin's growth and family events, while Trevor vents about work. Whenever something about Yasmin troubles me, talking to Trevor usually helps me forget by the next day. That's how important Trevor is to me. Currently, Trevor, who works for a major corporation, is not only kind and stylish but also handsome. It's a wonder why he doesn't have a girlfriend. Though he's popular, he seems uninterested in romance. His lack of interest in love is, ironically, what draws women to him, something Trevor hasn't realized. Despite everything, we've been living a happy life, supported by a loving family. Then one day, I got a phone call. "Hello? Trinity? It's me." The caller, unusually, was Trevor. Maybe it was just my imagination, but Trevor's voice seemed unusually lively. "I've got a fiancé." My intuition was right. "No way! Congratulations! That's great, Trevor." I was as happy for my beloved Trevor as if the good news were my own. A smile naturally spread across my face. "Trevor, you're so cool but never seemed interested in love. You finally met the right person. I'm so happy for you." "So, who is she?" When I asked, Trevor said a bit shyly, "She's someone you'd get along with, really kind. I'll introduce her when you come to our parents' house in 3 months." "In 3 months, got it. Let me know when it's closer, and I'll take time off work." And with one more. "Congratulations." I ended the call with Trevor. Even after hanging up, my excitement didn't fade. My beloved Trevor was getting married. I wondered what his partner was like, hoping we'd get along well. Filled with anticipation, I looked forward to the 3 months until Trevor's visit. Then, one day, on the way back from picking up my daughter Yasmin from the childcare center, she suddenly said, "Mom, I want to have a doggy." "A doggy? You mean a dog? What brought this on all of a sudden?" Yasmin likes dogs, but has never said she wanted one. Maybe one of Yasmin's friends at the childcare center got a dog and told her about it. "Because Dad called someone a doggy the other day." Yasmin gave an answer that I wasn't sure made any sense. Michael called someone a doggy? Would he say something like that? Feeling puzzled, I casually asked Yasmin about it. "Did Dad really say that to you?" "Why would he?" But Yasmin seemed to have lost interest in dogs already, now talking to a flower blooming nearby. "Hello, Mr. Flower. Hello, Mr. Flower." Maybe it's not something to worry about too much. That's what I thought, but even after we got home, took a shower with Yasmin, and ate dinner, the doggy Michael mentioned wouldn't leave my mind. After Michael got home and Yasmin was put to bed, I decided to ask him directly. "Hey, this might sound like a weird question, but what's this doggy thing about?" Michael seemed momentarily flustered by my question, then said with a bit of panic, "Oh, I went to a pet shop for work recently and saw some puppies. It made me think how nice it would be to have a dog. You know, they say kids grow up kinder with pets around." So, the doggy Michael mentioned was about a puppy he saw at the pet shop. He must have talked to Yasmin about the puppies. "Oh, so that's what it was. I was curious because it's not like you to talk about wanting a dog." Hearing the answer directly from Michael, I felt relieved. "It's nothing to worry about, you're overthinking it," Michael said with a laugh, so I decided not to dwell on it any further. 3 months had passed since Trevor's marriage announcement, and the day he was coming home finally arrived. Michael had work and said he would come after it was done, so Yasmin and I headed to my parents' house first. Mom, who seemed happy that Trevor was coming, greeted us with, "Trinity, come in, come in," smiling more joyously than usual. Unlike with me, Dad, who gets along well with Trevor, was in a good mood for this occasion. Until Trevor and his fiancée arrived, I helped Mom with cooking. We wanted to welcome Trevor and his fiancée with the best celebration possible. Yasmin was playing with Dad. The table was filled with Trevor's favorite dishes and the favorite foods of Trevor's fiancée, which I had asked about beforehand. Looking at the dishes laid out, I felt a bit of unease. It kind of resembles Michael's favorite dishes. But it must be a coincidence. As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang, and Trevor and his fiancée appeared. Michael hadn't finished work yet and wasn't there, but we started the meet and greet with just the family. Trevor's fiancée is apparently named Riley. I could hear Mom from the entrance. "Welcome, Riley." Mom greeted them, and the two stepped into the living room where Dad, Yasmin, and I were. At that moment, a voice came from beside me. Not a blessing, but an unexpected remark. "Ah, look, it's the bitch." Pointing at Riley, the voice was Yasmin's, who continued pointing while laughing. Riley, with her beautiful face, looked puzzled at Yasmin. "Yasmin, that's rude to our guest." I scolded her, and Yasmin made a sullen face and said, "Because Dad called her that. And Big Sis looked so happy about it. Why is it okay for Dad to say it, but not me? I was just playing with Dad when Mom wasn't around." Yasmin's baffling statement had me, Mom, Dad, and Trevor all scratching our heads. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Michael, having finished work, arrived. I went to welcome Michael, who then entered the living room. And that's when things took a sudden turn. "Cheater!" a voice suddenly erupted. Looking towards the source, it was Michael, his face red with anger, yelling at Trevor's fiancée, Riley. "Why are you here? What's the meaning of this? Is this some kind of harassment?" Michael was uncontrollably furious. His unusual behavior puzzled everyone else. Michael seemed to not even notice me, our parents, or Yasmin. Then, Riley, Trevor's fiancée, started raising her voice. Gone was her gentle demeanor, now replaced by a harsh tone, furrowing her brows. "Why are you here? And why should I be the one blamed? You were the one who came on to me. I was never serious about you." Riley was infuriated, blood rushing to her head. Although initially shocked, I began to understand the nature of their conversation was about an affair. "You're the one who said you wanted me to come over on holidays. I went out of my way for you, and this is how it ends. Give me back my weekends." Michael and Riley had been having an affair. And it seems they were using the weekends when I wasn't around for their escapades. They apparently enjoyed treating each other like pets frequently. Yasmin must have seen this. That's why she started talking about Doggy in such a strange way. The reason the prepared food resembled Michael's favorites makes sense now. They must have been dining out together often. All the pieces of unease clicked together in my mind. Realizing the truth, I immediately took Yasmin's hand and left the living room. I couldn't let Yasmin hear any of this. Whatever happens with Michael can be dealt with later, but Yasmin must be protected at all costs. Then Mom appeared and gently placed her hand on me. "I'll stay with Yasmin." It was her way of telling me to go back. I nodded and headed back to the living room. Inside, the heated argument between Michael and Riley continued. The conversation revolved mainly around their affair. It was too much for me to bear, feeling dizzy just listening to them. "Wait, just a minute." Finding a moment to interrupt their exchange was impossible. Their back and forth was intense and unrelenting. After several minutes, their argument finally began to subside. As they became aware of us around them, both crumbled to their knees, faces turning pale. "Michael, what is this? Explain yourself." The moment I began to confront Michael, he collapsed backward with a groan. "Enough. You are no longer family or anything to me. Get out now. Don't you dare touch my daughter." It was Dad who struck Michael. "You two, don't ever come back." Dad said this to Riley, then, with Riley and Michael unable to move, he pulled them by the arms and threw them out of the front door. And with one last remark, he spat out, "You two deserve the worst." In a setting meant for marriage introductions, Michael and Riley were thrown out for their affair being exposed. Afterward, I demanded a divorce and compensation from Michael in court. Ignoring Michael's futile pleas of, Let's talk it over. I proceeded with the divorce. It's too late to talk things over now. If you hadn't done anything in the first place, we wouldn't be in this situation. That was the last thing I said to Michael. Trevor, of course, called off his engagement with Riley. We're never going to see each other again. Don't contact me. Riley, in tears, pleaded with Trevor to reconsider the broken engagement. Please. I won't see that man again. Just give me one more chance. But Trevor, like me, dismissed Riley. People who do such things once will do them again. He then demanded compensation for the broken engagement from Riley. After the divorce, rumors of Michael's affair quickly spread throughout his company and to his clients, eroding the trust he had slowly built up. He was transferred to a department with no work to do, leading a life devoid of excitement. Riley, having quit her job in anticipation of marrying Trevor, found herself in debt due to the compensation payments. She ended up juggling multiple part-time jobs, working tirelessly every day without a break. Riley's dream of an easy life through marriage to Trevor turned into a nightmare of the exact opposite. Her ideal wedding plans were shattered overnight. It's true what they say, wrongdoing doesn't pay. Having closed the chapter on Michael, I returned home with Yasmin. Mom looked at me, slightly worn out, and asked with concern, "Trinity, are you okay?" Mom, I'm fine. It's good that Yasmin found out before she got any older. Some of it might stick in her memory, though. Then, to Dad, who was reading the newspaper in the living room. Dad, who had struck Michael at that moment. I could never have been as decisive. Dad, thank you for what you did with Michael. You were right. I was swept up in the moment thinking he was the one, but I should have been more discerning in judging people. When I apologized to Dad, he looked up from his newspaper and said to me, "Trinity, I'm sorry. I should have been more assertive in stopping you. I thought it would make you unhappy, but I didn't have a clear reason. Just not liking someone isn't enough for you to be convinced, right? Maybe I was just convinced that Dad and I didn't get along, that we weren't close. It's not your fault, Dad. I've learned a lot from this experience." Laughing together, Dad and I looked at each other as if to say, what was all that past conflict about? That's just how family relationships are, it seems. Misunderstanding each other for no reason, and before you know it, making up. I hope Yasmin and I can build that kind of relationship from now on. As for Trevor, he was shocked by Riley's affair and insisted he didn't want a girlfriend for a while. I'm done with that kind of pain. To think that the person I was about to marry was having an affair with my sister's husband. After living as a bachelor for some time, nursing his wounds, Trevor finally began to move on from Riley. He eventually married someone from a company he was dealing with. Trevor's new wife, a beautiful and wonderful woman, was truly deserving to walk by his side. Can I tell Uncle? Really? My 7-year-old niece said this as she alternated her gaze between my son and my husband. My son is about to turn 3, but he still can't speak. My niece, talking as if she's having a conversation with my son, looked up at my husband with a worried expression. Uncle, you see. My name is Melanie. I work at a staffing agency, and my husband, Timothy, works at the same company. Timothy and I met as colleagues at the company, and since we were close in age, we started dating through work consultations and eventually got married. Then, I became pregnant with our son, Hunter, and took maternity leave and parental leave. When Hunter turned 1, we looked for a childcare center to enroll him in, and I went back to work as planned, originally intending to return immediately. While sending our child to the childcare center, I worked to get back into the pace of work, and with Timothy's help, we managed to get through the busy days of work and childcare without any spare time. When we absolutely couldn't manage, or when Hunter got sick and had to leave the childcare center early, Madison, my mother-in-law who lives nearby, would often pick him up from the childcare center or watch over Hunter while I did household chores. We were very grateful, but Madison gradually started suggesting that we should quit the childcare center. In fact, Hunter was relatively advanced compared to children his age. He began walking just after turning 1, and though not yet conversational, he understood our words and could communicate simply. Madison started treating Hunter like a prodigy, insisting he shouldn't be in a public childcare center but rather receive gifted education under her constant care. This suggestion had us worried. While we were indebted to her, we tried to refuse politely by saying Hunter enjoyed the childcare center, which only made Madison furious. She didn't like that I had returned to work while Hunter was still so young and berated us, saying, "You don't love Hunter. Leaving him in childcare all day is negligent. Unlike you, I would be willing to stay with him all the time and take care of everything. Just hand Hunter over to me." I was shocked by Madison's accusation of being a bad mother, but I was even more frightened by her treating Hunter as an object to be handed over. After that, we tried not to rely on Madison, and if Timothy wasn't home when she came over, I pretended to be out. However, Madison started taking actions that couldn't be ignored, like picking up Hunter from childcare without our consent or trying to steal our house keys after bringing over sweets and insisting on coming in. Timothy, too, gave up on reasoning with her after seeing her unreasonableness. We decided to move without telling Madison and began looking for a new place in secret. However, finding a new home proved difficult. We thought it would be easy to find a house in a growing city, but with many people moving in, convenient properties sold quickly. While searching for a house behind Madison's back proved difficult, half a year flew by in no time. By then, Madison's interest in Hunter had waned significantly. Actually, even at a year and a half, Hunter still wasn't speaking at all. He used to babble a lot when he was younger, but lately, he's been completely silent except when crying. Taking him to the hospital worriedly, we found nothing abnormal. We were told that language development varies greatly among children and to keep a careful watch, so we went home carrying our worries. Seeing Hunter like this, Madison did a complete turnaround from treating him as a prodigy, declaring, "Not speaking much just means he's a disabled child. There must be something wrong with Melanie's body, and that's why she gave birth to a strange child. I don't know why Timothy ever married someone like her." And she labeled it as a disease. Despite the doctor's diagnosis, being told Hunter was sick and that I was abnormal brought me to tears. Madison hadn't been coming to our house recently, but when she did, it was unbearable how she could say such awful things, leaving me completely distraught. Then, Timothy got angrier than I've ever seen, declared we were cutting ties with Madison, and forcefully kicked her out of the house. After blocking Madison's contacts, we began to ignore her completely, even if she came to the house. Knowing Timothy's firm stance, Madison shouted, "I don't need a wife or grandson with disabilities," and never returned to our house again. Since then, we have been living peacefully as a family of 3, and before we knew it, Hunter turned 3, yet he still hadn't spoken a word. Considering it unusual for him not to speak by this point, we were advised at a public health screening to have Hunter examined at a major hospital. When Hunter and I went to the hospital recommended to us, we unexpectedly ran into my sister Yasmin and my niece Rose, who were there for vaccinations. Yasmin and Rose live far away, and because we had been busy, it had been difficult to meet, so we were delighted by this long-awaited reunion. Since Yasmin and Rose hadn't met Hunter since his birth, they greeted him for the first time. "What's your name?" "Hunter?" "That's cool." Yes, you're in the rabbit class, aren't you? Rose loves rabbits too. Despite not having mentioned Hunter's childcare class to Rose, she naturally continued the conversation as if it was obvious. Surprised, I asked Yasmin, and she said that Rose can understand the language of animals and babies who can't speak. Half in doubt, yet having witnessed it firsthand, I had no choice but to believe. When the four of us went to the hospital cafeteria for lunch, Rose said, "Does Hunter like hamburgers?" "Yes." "And he dislikes carrots?" "But they taste good together with hamburgers." "Does Hunter like hamburgers?" "Yes." "And he dislikes carrots?" "But they taste good together with hamburgers." Accurately guessing Hunter's likes and dislikes without being told, which left me speechless. Even after seeing the doctor, the reason why Hunter wouldn't speak remained a mystery. There were no issues with his throat or vocal cords. He could cry and laugh, but he wouldn't utter meaningful words like mom or dad. Feeling down about not finding a solution, Timothy came to pick us up from the hospital after his rounds in the evening. Since we were together, we decided to have dinner as a family of 5, moving to a family restaurant near the hospital. While waiting for our order to arrive, Rose looked back and forth between Hunter and Timothy, then stared at Timothy anxiously. "Hunter is asking when he can start talking to Uncle," she said. Surprised, Timothy looked at me, so I told him about how Rose had correctly guessed things she shouldn't know, like class names and Hunter's likes and dislikes, leaving Timothy to let out a disbelieving sigh. "Hunter really wants to talk to both Uncle and Auntie. But he couldn't because Grandma was always around, and he was afraid of being taken away," Rose conveyed. The phrase "always around" caught my attention, and I asked Rose for clarification, given that we hadn't been seeing Madison lately. Hunter shook his head and just stared at Rose. Then, as if struck by a brilliant idea, Rose clapped her hands together, smiled joyfully, and reassured Hunter. "Grandma isn't here now, so it's okay to talk." Hunter looked around uncertainly, then at me and Timothy. "Mom, Dad, is Grandma really not here?" Hunter's words came out so fluently that Timothy and I were shocked. As Yasmin calmed us down in our near panic, Hunter reached out his arms, asking to be held. Hastily, I lifted him from the child's seat onto my lap, where he grabbed my hands and happily kicked his legs. "When I was a baby, Grandma said she was going to take me home to talk a lot. I didn't talk because I liked Dad and Mom's house better." Hunter had simply chosen not to speak. This must have been around when he was about a year old. Recalling Madison's insistence on gifted education and her wanting to take him home. Furthermore, Hunter expressed his desire to talk to Timothy and me but felt he couldn't. "Because Grandma is always there. Inside Hunter's home, in the car, even at the rabbit class," he said. I was baffled by how Madison, who didn't live with us, could always be there, even in the car or at the childcare center. Then, remembering the timing of Madison's visits. On days we hadn't told her about hospital visits or when we received notifications about language training, Madison invariably showed up. Whispering my dreadful suspicion to Timothy, he looked at Hunter in dismay. "Can you tell where Grandma is in the house?" Timothy's soft question led Hunter to list several locations. Hearing his responses, Timothy's face turned red, and he trembled with emotion. Apologizing to Hunter for not noticing, we thanked Yasmin and Rose for their help before rushing home to confirm our bad hunch and take necessary actions. Once home, we asked Hunter again where Madison could be. Pointing with his little hands, Hunter showed us various places. Under the entrance shoe cabinet, behind the living room sofa, on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet, and when a device was found under the bedroom bed, I felt dizzy. "When Grandma came to pick me up, she left it behind. Grandma has always been in the house." Hunter explained, indicating that what seemed to be bugging devices had been left throughout our home, making it feel as though Madison was perpetually present. Discovering such devices within our home, similar to those seen on TV, and confirming their nature as surveillance devices available in abundance online was unsettling. Before the police arrived, Madison showed up at our house, having apparently been listening in on us as we searched for the bugs. Timothy couldn't hold back his fury, confronting Madison. "Mom, what do you think you're doing, planting bugs in our house like it's nothing? This is outrageous, creepy, and a serious crime. It's because Timothy ignored my contacts, isn't it? What's so wrong with wanting to know more about one's own family? We're family, after all. There's no need to make such a big fuss about this. More importantly, Hunter can speak. To think he can talk so much at 3, he must be gifted. Just as I thought, a real prodigy. I'll take him and provide him with gifted education so he can work at a big company in the future. And eventually, he can take care of me in my old age. Now I can rest easy." Madison showed no remorse for planting the listening devices, dismissing it as nothing significant. Her blatant disregard for Hunter's wishes and her self-centered assertions made us feel sick. Just as we were considering our next steps, the police arrived. After we explained the situation and the police confirmed with Madison herself, who didn't think she had done anything wrong, she readily admitted to planting the devices and was promptly taken into custody. Despite her resistance and insistence on her innocence, revealing the locations of the devices led to her being packed into a police car and taken to the station. Following Madison's confession, a specialist recommended by the police found numerous listening devices in our home and car. The realization that we hadn't noticed such extensive surveillance was embarrassing. The thought of Madison having heard all our conversations made us dizzy. In the end, Madison was arrested for burglary and criminal mischief, showing no signs of remorse for her excessive actions, even though it was her son and DIL's home. Furthermore, during the interrogation, Madison confessed to also planting listening devices at the child care center. Just as Hunter had said, she had bugged the class he attended. She had paid a staff member, who was a friend, to install them. An investigation at the child care center indeed found several devices. The staff member who assisted Madison faced serious legal consequences and disciplinary action. Timothy was deeply affected by his mother's disturbing behavior. But most importantly, for Hunter and me, we decided to move away from this town filled with unpleasant memories as quickly as possible while Madison was preoccupied with police proceedings, seeking a peaceful life. Considering our job situations, we decided to move near Yasmin's family. Upon explaining our circumstances, Yasmin's family was shocked but understanding, offering their sympathy and saying, "You've been through a lot, well done." With Yasmin's family helping with the move, everything went smoothly. Since then, despite it being her first offense, Madison received a prison sentence due to the malicious, cunning nature of her actions, which were premeditated and carried out with clear intent. Despite Madison's full confession, she seemed unable to comprehend why her attempts to learn more about her family were met with such serious consequences, ranting and causing a scene at the police station, claiming, "Let me out of here! I was just trying to get to know my family better. I've done nothing wrong." When we were informed by the new residents of our old home about a letter filled with grievances and demands for release that Madison sent, it was a stark reminder of how fortunate we were to have moved to a place beyond her reach, and the thought of what could have happened if Hunter had been taken by her sent shivers down our spine. Now, free from Madison's watchful eyes and with Hunter able to speak without any reservations, our family enjoys brighter and more communicative days together. Hunter's verbal skills are impressively advanced for a 3-year-old. leading us to wonder if he might indeed be what Madison claimed, a gifted child. However, this does not justify Madison's actions, nor does it mean we are willing to forgive her. Living closer to Yasmin's family has enriched our lives with increased interactions, and Yasmin has been a great help with tasks like picking Hunter up from childcare, which Madison used to handle. Our weekends are now filled with joyous outings to amusement parks, zoos, and trips planned together, fostering a close and supportive relationship. Reflecting on the hardships Hunter endured, we are determined to compensate for the past by ensuring he grows up in an environment where he can freely express himself without restraint, committed to never letting him feel suppressed again.